Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpa Tribhyascha Klipasindhi Devasya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So welcome to our reading this evening from Krishna book, Krishna the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada Summary Study. Srimad Bhagavatam, so that we could get an early look at it. He gave us this summary study. So today we're up to chapter 9, Mother Yasoda binds Lord Krishna, but that's a very short chapter. So we'll also do chapter 10, read chapter 10, the deliverance of Nalakuvara and Manigriva. So first we'll chant what's the verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita that Prabhupada has at the beginning of his introduction. Krishna, 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 Hare. Krishna, 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 Hare. Krishna, 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 Rama. Krishna, 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 Hare Rama, Raghava, Raghava, Rama, Raghava, Krishna, 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 Hare. Nupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nivishesa Sunyavari Paschachade Satarane. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Chapter 9, Mother Yasoda binds Lord Krishna. Once upon a time, seeing that her maidservant was engaged in different household duties, Mother Yasoda personally took charge of churning butter. And while she churned butter, she sang the childhood pastimes of Krishna and enjoyed thinking of her son. The end of her sari was tightly wrapped while she churned, and on account of her intense love for her son, milk automatically dripped from her breasts, which moved as she labored very hard, churning with 2 hands. The bangles and bracelets on her hands tinkled as they touched each other, and her earrings and breasts shook. There were drops of perspiration on her face, and the flower garland which was on her head scattered here and there. Before this picturesque sight, Lord Krishna appeared as a child. He felt hungry, and to increase his mother's love, he wanted her to stop churning. He indicated that her first business was to let him suck her breast, and then she could churn butter later. Mother Yasoda took her son on her lap and pushed the nipple of her breast into his mouth, and while Krishna was sucking the milk, she was smiling, enjoying the beauty of her child's face. Suddenly the milk which was on the stove began to boil over. Just to stop the milk from spilling, Mother Yasoda at once put Krishna aside and went to the stove. Left in that state by his mother, Krishna became very angry and his lips and eyes became red in rage. He pressed his teeth and lips, and taking up a piece of stone, he immediately broke the butter pot. He took butter out of it, and with false tears in his eyes, he began to eat the butter in a secluded place. In the meantime, Mother Yasoda returned to the churning place after setting the overflowing milk pan in order. She saw the broken pot in which the churning yogurt had been kept. By the way, you notice that they churn yogurt to make butter and not just butter, milk by itself. They turn it into yogurt first. Much better butter, actually. Healthier for you. Just a point. She saw the broken pot in which the churning yogurt had been kept. Since she could not find her boy, she concluded that the broken pot was his work. She smiled as she thought, "The child is very clever. After breaking the pot, he has left this place, fearing punishment." After she sought all over, she found her son sitting on a big wooden grinding mortar, which was kept upside down. He was taking butter from a pot which was hanging from the ceiling on a swing, and he was feeding it to the monkeys. She saw Krishna looking this way and that in fear of her, because he was conscious of his naughty behavior. After seeing her son so engaged, she very silently approached him from behind. Krishna, however, saw her coming toward him with a stick in her hand, and he immediately got down from the grinding mortar and began to flee in fear. Mother Yasoda chased him to all corners, trying to capture the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never approached even by the meditations of great yogis. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is never caught by the yogis and speculators, was playing just like a little child for such a great devotee as Mother Yasoda. Excuse me. Mother Yasoda, however, could not easily catch the fast-running child because of her thin waist and heavy body. Still, she tried to follow him as fast as possible. Her hair loosened and the flower in her hair fell to the ground. Although she was tired, she somehow reached her naughty child and captured him. When he was caught, Krishna was almost on the point of crying. He smeared his hands over his eyes, which were anointed with black eye cosmetics. You see in India today, even they still do that with children. I think it's medicinal more than cosmetic. The child saw his mother's face while she stood over him, and his eyes became restless from fear. Mother Yasoda could understand that Krishna was unnecessarily afraid, and for his benefit she wanted to allay his fears. Being the topmost well-wisher of her child, Mother Yasoda thought, "If this child is too fearful of me, I don't know what will happen to him." Mother Yasoda then threw away her stick. In order to punish him, she thought to bind his hands with some ropes. She did not know it, but it was actually impossible for her to bind the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mother Yasoda was thinking that Krishna was her tiny child. She did not know that the child had no limitation. There is no inside or outside of him, nor beginning or end. He is unlimited and all-pervading. Indeed, he is himself the whole cosmic manifestation. Still, Mother Yasoda was thinking of Krishna as her child. Although he is beyond the reach of all senses, she endeavored to bind him to a wooden grinding mortar. But when she tried to bind him, she found that the rope she was using was too short by 2 inches. She gathered more ropes from the house and added to it, but still she found the same shortage. In this way she connected all the ropes available at home, but when the final knot was added, she saw that the rope was still 2 inches too short. Mother Yasoda was smiling, but she was astonished. How was it happening? In attempting to bind her son, she became tired. She was perspiring, and the garland on her head fell down. Then Lord Krishna appreciated the hard labor of his mother, and being compassionate upon her, he agreed to be bound up by the ropes. Krishna, playing as a human child in the house of Mother Yasoda, was performing his own selected pastimes. Of course, no one can control the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The pure devotee surrenders himself unto the lotus feet of the Lord, who may either protect or vanquish the devotee. But for his part, the devotee never forgets his own position of surrender. Similarly, the Lord also feels transcendental pleasure by submitting himself to the protection of the devotee. This was exemplified by Krishna's surrender to his mother, Yasoda. He's not controlled by anything, but is controlled by the love of his devotees. Krishna is the supreme bestower of all kinds of liberation to his devotees, but the benediction which was bestowed upon Mother Yasoda was never experienced even by Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva or the goddess of fortune. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as the son of Yasoda and Nanda Maharaj, is never so completely known to the yogis and speculators, but he is easily available to his devotees. Nor is he appreciated as the supreme reservoir of all pleasure by the yogis and the speculators. After binding her son, Mother Yasoda engaged herself in household affairs. At that time, bound up to the wooden mortar, Krishna could see a pair of trees before him, which were known as Arjuna trees. The great reservoir of pleasure, Lord Krishna thus thought to himself, Mother Yasoda first of all left without feeding me sufficient milk, and therefore I broke the pot of yogurt and distributed the stock butter in charity to the monkeys. Now she has bound me up to a wooden mortar, so I shall do something more mischievous than before. And thus he thought of pulling down the 2 very tall Arjuna trees. The Arjuna trees are still there in India, and they are very tall. They're evergreens, with lots of medicinal properties, but they're noted for their height. There is a history behind the pair of Arjuna trees. In their previous lives, the trees were born as the human sons of Kubera, and their names were Nalakuvara and Manigriva. Fortunately, they came within the vision of the Lord. In their previous lives, they were cursed by the great sage Narada in order to receive the highest benediction of seeing Lord Krishna. This benediction curse If you see the text, Prabhupada has these hyphenated benediction curse. This benediction curse was bestowed upon them because of their forgetfulness due to intoxication. The story will be narrated in the next chapter. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 9th chapter of Krishna, Mother Yasoda binds Lord Krishna. So chapter 10, the deliverance of Nalakuvara and Manigriva. The story of the cursing of Nalakuvara and Manigriva and their deliverance by Krishna under the all blissful desire of the great sage Narada is here described. Don't you think interesting, all blissful desire? The two great demigods, Nalakuvara and Manigriva, were sons of the treasurer of the demigods, Kuvera, who was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. By the grace of Lord Shiva, Kuvera's material opulences had no limit, as rich man's sons often become addicted to wine and women. So these two sons of Kuvera were also addicted to wine and sex. Once these two demigods, desiring to enjoy, entered the garden of Lord Shiva in the province of Kailasa on the bank of the Mandakini Ganges. There they drank much and engaged in hearing the sweet singing of the beautiful women who accompanied them in that garden of fragrant flowers. In an intoxicated condition, the two demigods entered the water of the Ganges, which was filled with lotus flowers. And there they began to enjoy the company of the young girls exactly as a male elephant enjoys female elephants within the water. While they were thus enjoying themselves in the water, all of a sudden Narada, the great sage, happened to pass that way. He could understand that the demigods Nalakuvara and Manigriva were too much intoxicated and could not even see that he was passing. The young girls, however, were not so much intoxicated as the demigods, and they at once became ashamed of being naked before the great sage Narada. These girls, the Apsaras, the Prabhupada called them the heavenly society girls. So they at once became ashamed of being naked before the great sage Narada. They began to cover themselves with all haste. The two demigod sons of Kuvera were so much intoxicated that they could not appreciate the presence of the sage Narada and therefore did not cover their bodies. On seeing the two demigods so degraded by intoxication, Narada desired their welfare, and therefore he exhibited his causeless mercy upon them by cursing them. Because sometimes the curses of great devotees are actually benedictions in disguise, as we shall see. Because the great sage was compassionate upon them, he wanted to finish their false enjoyment of intoxication and association with young girls and wanted them to see Lord Krishna face to face. He conceived of cursing them as follows. He said that the attraction for material enjoyment is due to an increase of the mode of passion. A person in the material world, when favored by the material opulences of riches, generally becomes addicted to three things: intoxication, sex, and gambling. Materially opulent men, being puffed up with the accumulation of wealth, also become so merciless that they indulge in killing animals by opening slaughterhouses. And they think that they themselves will never die. Such foolish persons, forgetting the laws of nature, become overly infatuated with the body. They forget that the material body, even though very much advanced in civilization, up to the position of the demigods, will finally turn into ashes or stool. While one is living, whatever the external condition of the body may be, within there is only stool, urine, and various kinds of worms. Thus, being engaged in jealousy and violence to other bodies, materialists cannot understand the ultimate goal of life. Without knowing this goal of life, they generally glide down to a hellish condition in their next life. Such foolish persons commit all kinds of sinful activities on account of the temporary body, and they are even unable to consider whether the body actually belongs to them. Generally, it is said that the body belongs to the persons who feed it. Or one might therefore consider whether the body belongs to only one personally, or to the master to whom one renders service. The master of slaves claims full right to the body of the slaves because the master feeds the slaves. It may also be questioned whether the body belongs to the father, who is the seed-giving master of the body, or to the mother, who develops the child's body in her womb. Foolish persons are engaged in committing all sorts of sins due to the misconception of identifying the material body with the self. But one should be intelligent enough to understand to whom the body belongs. A foolish person indulges in killing animals to maintain the body, but he does not consider whether the body belongs to him, or to his father, or mother, or maternal grandfather. Sometimes a father gives a daughter in charity to a person with the view of getting back the daughter's child as a son. The body may also belong to a stronger man who forces it to work for him, like a wage slave, for example, as we call them. Sometimes a slave's body is sold to a master, and from that day on the body belongs to the master. And at the end of life, the body belongs to the fire, because the body is given to the fire and burned to ashes, or the body is thrown into the street to be eaten by the dogs and vultures. Before committing all kinds of sins to maintain the body, one should understand to whom the body belongs. Ultimately, it is concluded that the body is a product of material nature, and at the end, it merges into material nature. Therefore, the conclusion should be that the body belongs to material nature. One should not wrongly think that the body belongs to him. To maintain a false possession, why should one indulge in killing? Why should one kill innocent animals to maintain the body? When a man is infatuated with the false prestige of opulence, he does not care for any moral instruction, like we've just been given, but indulges in wine, women, and animal killing. In such circumstances, a poverty-stricken man is often better situated because a poor man thinks of himself in relation to other bodies. A poor man often does not wish to inflict injuries upon other bodies because he can understand more readily that when he himself is injured, he feels pain. Therefore the great sage Narada considered that because the demigods Nalakuvara and Manigriva were so infatuated by false prestige, they should be put in a condition of life devoid of opulence. A person who has a pinprick in his body does not wish others to be pricked by pins. A considerate man in the life of poverty does not wish others to be also put into that condition. Generally, it is seen that one who has risen from a poverty-stricken life and becomes wealthy creates some charitable institution at the end of his life so that other poverty-stricken men might be benefited. In short, a compassionate poor man may consider others' pains and pleasures with empathy. A poor man is seldom puffed up with false pride, and he may be freed from all kinds of infatuation. He may remain satisfied by whatever he gets for his maintenance by the grace of the Lord. To remain in a poverty-stricken condition is a kind of austerity. According to Vedic culture, therefore, the Brahmanas, as a matter of routine, keep themselves in a poverty-stricken condition to save themselves from the false prestige of material opulence. False prestige, due to the advancement of material prosperity, is a great impediment for spiritual emancipation. I'd like that on some big building in Washington, D.C., carved in marble. A poverty-stricken man cannot become unnaturally fat by eating more and more. And on account of not being able to eat more than he requires, his senses are not very turbulent. When the senses are not very turbulent, he cannot become violent. Another advantage of poverty is that a saintly person can easily enter a poor man's house, and thus the poor man can take advantage of the saintly person's association. A very opulent man does not allow anyone to enter his house. Therefore, the saintly person cannot enter. According to the Vedic system, a saintly person takes the position of a mendicant so that on the plea of begging something from the householder, he can enter any house. The householder, who has usually forgotten everything about spiritual advancement because he is busy maintaining family affairs, can be benefited by the association of a saintly person. There is a great chance for the poor man to become liberated through association with a saint. Of what use are persons who are puffed up with material opulence and prestige if they are bereft of the association of saintly persons and devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? The great sage Narada thereafter thought that it was his duty to put those demigods into a condition where they could not be falsely proud of their material opulence and prestige. Narada was compassionate and wanted to save them from their fallen life. They were in the mode of darkness, and being therefore unable to control their senses, they were addicted to sex life. It was the duty of a saintly person like Narada to save them from their abominable condition. In animal life, the animal has no sense to understand that he is naked. But Kuvera was the treasurer of the demigods and a very responsible man, and Nalakuvara and Manigriva were two of his sons. And yet they became so animalistic and irresponsible that they could not understand due to intoxication, that they were naked. To cover the lower part of the body is a principle of human civilization, and when men or women forget this principle, they become no better than animals. Narada therefore thought that the best punishment for them was to make them immovable living entities, or trees. Trees are by nature's law immovable. Although trees are covered by the mode of ignorance, they cannot do harm. The great sage Narada thought it was fitting that although the brothers would be punished to become trees, by his mercy they would continue to keep their memory and be able to know why they were being punished. After changing the body, a living entity generally forgets his previous life, but in special cases, by the grace of the Lord, as with Nalakuvara and Manigriva, one can remember. Sage Narada therefore contemplated that the two demigods should remain for 100 years in the time of the demigods, which is each year is 360 human years, so a long time, should remain for 100 years in the time of the demigods in the form of trees. And after that, they would be fortunate enough to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face by his causeless mercy. And thus they would again be promoted to the life of the demigods and become great devotees of the Lord. So when somebody like Narada curses, there's a curse, but it's a benediction. After this, the great sage Narada returned to his abode, known as Narayana Ashrama, and the two demigods turned into trees known as twin Arjuna trees. The two demigods were favored by the causeless mercy of Narada and given a chance to grow in Nanda's courtyard and see Lord Krishna face to face. Although child Krishna was bound up to the wooden mortar, he began to proceed toward the twin trees in order to fulfill the prophecy of his great devotee, Narada. Lord Krishna knew that Narada was his great devotee and that the trees standing before him as twin Arjuna trees were actually the sons of Kuvera. I mean, this is still a nursing baby, but I must now fulfill the words of my great devotee Narada, he thought. He then proceeded through the passage between the two trees. Although he was able to pass through the passage, the large wooden mortar stuck horizontally between the trees. Taking advantage of this, with great strength, Lord Krishna began to pull the rope which was tied to the mortar. Remember, he's just a little toddler. He doesn't even walk yet. As soon as he pulled, the two great trees, with all their branches and limbs, fell down with a great sound. Out of the broken fallen trees came two great personalities, shining like blazing fire. All sides became illuminated and beautiful by their presence. The two purified personalities immediately came before child Krishna and bowed down to offer their respects and prayers in the following words. Remember, they had been conscious all along. Dear Lord Krishna, this is their prayers, it's in quotation marks in the book. Dear Lord Krishna, you are the original personality of Godhead, master of all mystic powers. Learned Brahmanas know very well that this cosmic manifestation is an expansion of your potencies, which are sometimes manifest and sometimes unmanifest. You are the original provider of the life, body, and senses of all living entities. You are the eternal God, Lord Vishnu, who is all-pervading, the imperishable controller of everything, and you are eternal time. You are the original source of the cosmic manifestation, which is acting under the spell of the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. You are living as the supersoul in all the multiforms of living entities, and you know very well what is going on within their bodies and minds. Therefore, you are the supreme director of all activities of all living entities. But although you are in the midst of everything which is under the spell of the material modes of nature, you are not affected by such contaminated qualities. No one under the jurisdiction of the material modes can understand your transcendental qualities which existed before the creation. Therefore you are called the Supreme Transcendence. Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of you, Lord Vasudeva, the Supreme Brahman, who are always glorified by your personal, internal potencies. In the material world, you make yourself known only by your different incarnations. Although you assume different types of bodies, these bodies are not part of the material creation. They are always full of transcendental potencies of unlimited opulence, strength, beauty, fame, wisdom, and renunciation. These are the Bhagas that make up Bhagavan. In the material existence, there is a difference between the body and the owner of the body. But because you appear in your original spiritual body, there is no such difference for you. When you appear, your uncommon activities indicate that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such uncommon activities are not possible for anyone in material existence. You, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, cause the birth and death as well as the liberation of the living entities, and you are full with all your plenary expansions. Plenary means with full power. You can bestow on everyone all kinds of benedictions, O Lord, O source of all auspiciousness and goodness. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you. You are the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, the supreme source of peace, and the Supreme Personality in the dynasty of King Yadu. O Lord, our Father, known as Kuvera, the demigod, is your servant. Similarly, the great sage Narada is also your servitor, and only by their grace have we been able to see you personally. Nice that he includes his father in that. We therefore pray that we may always be engaged in your transcendental loving service by speaking only about your glories and hearing about your transcendental activities. May our hands and other limbs be engaged in your service, and our minds always be concentrated at your lotus feet, and our heads always bowed down before the all-pervading universal form of your lordship. Notice how they consider everything as included in Krishna as well as separate. When the demigods Nalakuvara and Manigriva finished their prayers, the child, Lord Krishna, the master and proprietor of Gokula, bound to the wooden grinding mortar by the ropes of Yasoda, smiled and said, "It was already known to me that my great devotee, Narada Muni, has shown his causeless mercy by saving you from the abominable condition of pride due to possessing extraordinary beauty and opulence in a family of demigods. He saved you from gliding down into the lowest condition of hellish life. All these facts are already known to me. You are very fortunate because not only were you cursed by him, but you had the great opportunity to see him. If someone is able, by chance, to see face to face a great saintly person like Narada, who is always serene and merciful to everyone, then immediately that conditioned soul becomes liberated. This is exactly like being situated in the full light of the sun. There cannot be any visionary impediment. Therefore, O Nalakuvara and Manigriva, your lives have now become successful because you have developed ecstatic love for me. This is your last birth within material existence. Now you can go back to your father's residence in the heavenly planets, and by remaining in the attitude of devotional service, you will be liberated in this very life. After this, the demigods circumambulated the Lord many times and bowed down before him again and again, and thus they left. The Lord remained bound up with ropes to the grinding mortar. Thus in the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 10th chapter of Krishna, the deliverance of Nalakuvara and Manigriva.
Thank you very much. And
what a story, huh?
Yeah, pretty amazing. So now we're just opening it up for anybody who would like to offer some comments or questions or reflections, anything that kind of struck you in these readings that would further the discussion. Go ahead and type those into the comment section on Facebook, or if you're on the phone, you can press *6 and then we'll unmute yourself so you can offer a comment. And to start off, Akendra Prabhu says, my obeisances and thanks. When Srila Prabhupada says, the pure devotee surrenders himself unto the lotus feet of the Lord, who may either protect or vanquish the devotee, one might think, wait a minute, I thought Krishna said that if you surrender unto him, he will protect you and you should not fear.
That's what he says. But the devotee says, you can do with me whatever you like. Because sometimes it may seem that he gives us a hard time. You could just see with Prabhupada sometimes the difficulties he faced to do what he did. But when bad things happen to devotees, it's an impetus to becoming closer to Krishna. And they treat it as a benediction. That's the other thing. What looks like the difference between a benediction and a curse may turn out to be all benedictions for a devotee. As we see in the story. What looked like a curse.
Tulsi Priya says, obeisances and thank you for the reading. Did it say at the beginning of the chapter that Nalakuvara and Manigriva were the human sons of Kuvera? Sorry, I don't have the text in front of me.
They're demigods. And so yeah, Kuvera was he was the treasurer, and he was his son, so they were also devas.
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu says, "Thank you as always for this reading, Gurudev. I really appreciate the passage that begins, quote, 'Another advantage of poverty is.'"
Yeah, that's nice, isn't it?
I also was, in the previous story of Mother Yasoda binding Krishna, I really appreciate that line that Krishna still feels pleasure when he surrenders to his devotees, that even in his submission, that's pleasure and enjoyment for him, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
And also just kind of a funny question. Nalakuvara and Manigriva, they were cursed to be trees, and yet they had the benediction of being able to remember their past lives and understand why they were in that position. Were they also able to perceive Krishna's pastimes as trees going on around them before they were toppled over?
I'm not sure. They certainly realized what was happening when he was there, dealing with them. But remember, he had just been born.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a lot happening yet.
Well, we already had Putana and Trinavarta, and I'm just wondering if they were conscious of that stuff as well.
I don't know how much they knew at that time.
They were conscious of their past, but I don't know if they were conscious of the present.
Mm-hmm.
And Tulsi Priya offers, she says, "I thought I heard human. Maybe it was two sons, and I heard human." And just a few comments here. Devadarana Devidasi says, "Thank you so much for this reading. As ever, I feel quite fortunate. My deepest obeisances to you, dear sir."
Thank you.
Gaura Shakti Prabhu says, "Thank you so much for tonight's reading, dear Gurudev." Akanta Bhakti says, "Thank you, Gurudev," with a smiley-faced emoticon. And let's see here. Radhika Ramana Prabhu says, "Hare Krishna." Okay, and Tulsi Priya says, "Jai Gurudev." Madhavendra Puri Prabhu says, "Was the grinding mortar an hourglass shape? It is said it was stowed upside down." Okay, guess with the grinding side down?
I'm not sure. It had to be some kind of long and narrow in the waist, so you could have the rope around it, and then. But I assume that the faces of it were somewhat concave, so you could grind things in it with a. I'm not sure what it looks like exactly.
Madhavendra Puri just says, "It's always painted in the shape of an hourglass, but I'm suspicious."
Yeah, could be. That's how we've seen it, but.
And Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu says, "Question, is there some significance to their not going back to the spiritual world instead of going back to the heavenly realm?"
No, I don't know. Yeah. But I get from the very last paragraphs that you will be liberated. They still had a little ways to go. They were not quite. They'd seen Krishna and everything else, but they had somehow further to make a little more spiritual advancement too. That's clear from the last paragraphs.
And Charachandra offers, he says, the grinding mortar was stored upside down so it doesn't fill up with rainwater.
Mm-hmm.
And Tulsi Priya says, if they were trapped as trees for 100 demigod years, how does that tally with the demigod lifespan? And wouldn't the other demigods of their generation have expired?
Haven't figured that out.
Need to do the math.
Yeah.
And Adi Devi says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada with the folded hand emoticon. And I think we're wrapping it up. Quite a few people are on tonight. Your wife from the other house. Gaura Shakti Prabhu, Kendra Prabhu, Tulsi Priya Prabhu, Lavanga Mandri, Deva Dharana, Adi Devi, Madhavendra Puri, Akanta Bhakti, Krishna Chaitanya, Charu Chandra, Nandi Mukhi, and Adi Gopi, and others.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
Welcome everybody. Thank you for
I'm
joining
glad
in.
to see the Krishna book is popular.
Yes. And Lavanga Mandri says, thank you, exclamation point.
Well, it's fun for me to read it out loud. You have to read it more carefully than sometimes you will. So, next episode, chapter 11, Killing the Demons, Vatsasura and Bakasura.
Okay.
We have something to look forward to. A couple more demons.
We have a few more comments here. Radhika Ramana Prabhu says, Srila Prabhupada has saved and continues to save so many lives through his books and disciples.
True.
And Lavanga Mandri says, Krishna Purvaja is here too.
Good. Haribol.
And Gaura Shakti says, I can't wait for next week. Okay. And Tulsi Priya offers her obeisances.
Hare Krishna. My obeisance to everyone else. Haribol.
Until next week. Hare
Yeah,
Krishna, everyone.
Krishna book ki jai.
Jai.